hello there. Many welcomes to you. Many kisses too. All for you. There you go. I was wondering, do you think Cassandra feels more like a human or a fish? A mer or a maid? I was asking her, but she doesn't answer me. She covers her boobies like a human lady, but no underpants. Like fish. I also wear no underpants, but firstly, I am a fish, and secondly, nobody has complained. So far, what if your sense of your own identity does not match how you appear to others? Would it be difficult? Maybe. Now, this is a tricky subject, but to share her perspective on this matter, we have invited a licensed professional counselor, Sasha Ayad. Sasha, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Phil. I love the way you're moving through the water so naturally. Nice moves.
Thank you. I love the way you keep your eyeballs moistened. Can you show me one more time? Oh, there you go. Work those eyeballs, Sasha. I cannot do this. I don't have these eye thingies.
Well, that means you make really good eye contact, Phil, so thank you.
Sasha, well, I have little choice in the matter, but I suppose it's true. So, Sasha Ayad, can you tell us a little about your background, education, profession, that kind of thing?
Well, I've always been pretty interested in psychology. So in college, I studied psychology and sociology and history. And I've always been interested in the way that human beings are impacted by our environments and influenced by other people. So I worked with autism for some time, and I also worked with survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse, and I worked with teenagers and young adults with disabilities. So around 8 years ago, I started to become really interested in the way LGBT issues were kind of evolving and changing in our culture. And particularly, I noticed that a lot of young people were starting to explore a different gender identity.
Aha, so this is one of the things that people want us to talk about, actually. We have a website, people leave suggestions. So as I understand it, there are boys who feel they are girls and girls who feel they are boys. Is there a word for this?
Yes, so there is a term in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. This is the book that psychiatrists and therapists use to diagnose patients. And this term is called gender dysphoria.
Okay, so can you elaborate on what that word means?
Well, what's really interesting about gender dysphoria is that when you start to learn about it and read about it, it's a bit nebulous. So, for example, feeling like you are different or feeling uncomfortable as you approach puberty with your genitals developing and your secondary sex characteristics. These are very relatable experiences, especially during childhood and puberty and adolescence. So for me, what strikes me is that all the young people I've worked with didn't have gender dysphoria until they learned about gender dysphoria. And most of them started getting curious about it and reading a lot about it, and it almost became a little bit obsessive at first. And so if you develop gender dysphoria after never having it before, as a therapist, I get really curious about what that means. So if we take common experiences of distress and we reframe them as gender dysphoria, then there's something you can do about it according to this narrative. Transition is a set of steps that you can actually take. And the more you start to focus on the resolution, the more convinced people become that it's their gender that's really the problem.
Interesting. So what can you tell us about the current approach to treatment?
Do you mean the affirmative approach?
Aha, yes. What is that?
Well, the affirmative model of care assumes that you must take the child's statements or preferences at face value and socially or medically transition the child. So I find this to be problematic because we know that identity fluctuates over time. So for example, some people who are struggling or insisting they're the other gender in childhood will resolve that gender dysphoria as they get older. Can I share an example about that?
Oh yeah, hit me with it, please.
Okay, so I have a friend and colleague named Stella O'Malley. She's actually the co-host of a podcast that we run together. And she had a gender issue as a child. Now, at the time, she was not taken to any doctors, but she insisted that she should have been a boy for many years in her childhood. She dressed as a boy, she called herself a boy, and around puberty, she started to feel very distressed. Now, ultimately for Stella, the difficulty of puberty helped her realize that biology is bigger than she is. And she actually ended up outgrowing her distress. And she's quite happy as a woman. She's married and has children now. But she's a great example of a person who has struggled with their gender, but had that resolve on its own with time and space.
That is interesting, Sasha. Let me think for a moment.
Okay.
Thank you. So, if Sasha's friend, or what her name, Stella, had changed to become Stan, let's say, maybe she would not have had her children and feel quite so happy now. Maybe that depends if she likes her children. I will not ask that, but I will ask, Sasha, is it sometimes okay to accept the child's self-diagnosing?
Mm-hmm. If a child, for example, says, I think I might be gay, right? We wouldn't want to challenge them. We would just want to say, great, we accept you for who you are and move right along. The difference, however, is that being gay or lesbian or bisexual, it doesn't require any medical intervention. It is just a kind of fact of experience. And it might fluctuate and be fluid over time. Validating a gender identity is a little bit different. There's no other case really in which a person makes a material claim about themselves that the therapist is supposed to validate. So if I were to say, for example, that I'm actually 10 feet tall.
10 feet tall, you say?
You wouldn't say, yes, you are, Sasha, and you wouldn't validate that claim.
Oh, I see the point you are making. But does the same logic really apply here?
It's a bit tricky because a sense of femininity or masculinity is really internal and subjective. And so I think there are ways to validate that experience without taking it so literally and telling the child that they are literally the other sex.
But Sasha Ayad, telling children, does this approach go that far beyond the aforementioned affirmation?
Mm-hmm. So there's this really interesting example of a very well-known affirmative clinician here in the United States in California talking about a patient that she was seeing. So the patient was female, and the mother brought this young girl in to see the doctor because the girl had been at some point claiming to be a boy, but had changed her mind. So the mother said, I think my transgender child is confused. Can you help them to sort it out? So the doctor said to the patient, have you ever had Pop-Tarts? And the patient says yes. And she says, well, if you have a Pop-Tart and the box says cherry, but you open up the Pop-Tart and you take a bite and you realize it's a cinnamon Pop-Tart, is it a cherry Pop-Tart or a cinnamon Pop-Tart? And the child says, oh, I think I get it now. So on the outside, I'm a girl, but on the inside, I'm really a boy. So this is the framework that affirmative clinicians use, which I think just demonstrates the power of suggestion. And if your assumption is that a young person is really a boy on the inside, it prevents you from really understanding what else could be going on.
Interesting, Sasha. So you mentioned this child was trans, but then had second thoughts. Does this happen? Do some people change their minds after transitioning?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you gained a sense of what this journey is like for them?
So, it's really hard for individuals who, have taken those steps and then perhaps later changed their mind for whatever reason, because now they have to again float through the world with an internal sense of self that doesn't quite match how they look on the outside. So it's really, really important for people to understand that detransition is not a flippant thing that we can just kind of chalk up to some gender journey. I know lots of young people who identified with their birth sex and they are able to move forward and be fine. And I know for others who are trying to detransition, it can be very difficult as well.
Well, transitioning must help most people who feel they need it, surely.
It certainly seems like it helps some people. Unfortunately, in terms of long-term data and really robust follow-up studies, we don't have many. Right now, it's very easy to find news stories, for example, and firsthand accounts of people describing transition as being life-saving. I know that for individuals who have been researching, hopeful about, and waiting for transition services, there can be kind of an initial surge of excitement and relief when they start medically transitioning. However, what I've learned is that in long term, there are a lot of medical complications. And unfortunately, data shows that transitioning doesn't necessarily resolve gender dysphoria, and it doesn't necessarily mean that people will be better off in terms of their overall mental health in the long run.
What do you mean?
So some people have equally elevated risks of mental health issues or suicidal ideations. And I think that there are also individuals who don't get the right kind of psychological support while they're going through the transition process, which can be very difficult. So not the best outcomes in the long run that we've seen.
Well, I suppose there will be more long-term studies eventually, and perhaps they will give some answers. How common is a transition nowadays?
Well, in childhood and adolescence, young people presenting at gender clinics seeking help for gender identity issues has really skyrocketed. So in the UK, for example, we see that there's been a 4,400% increase.
Sorry, Sasha, 44 what?
4,400%.
Can you explain this percentage a little?
Okay, so what that means, so I'll give you an example. There's the Gender Identity Development Service in the UK, which is a centralized healthcare service. So any child who's struggling with gender issues will be referred through this clinic. It's called the Tavistock GIDS. And their data from the years between 2009 and 2016 show this huge spike in young people seeking transition.
Okay, let me have another think. So, if we still don't have the long-term studies, then it is possible that the majority of the children who transition will be happy with their decision in the long term. But even if a minority are not, then it might be worth to know why this current approach to treating gender dysphoria is used. What do you think, Cassandra? Oh, you are still not talking to me. Sasha Ayad, my question is, if the current approach is imprecise or problematic, as you say, why do you think it is still used?
That's a good question.
I thought so.
It's really tricky because many individuals feel better when they start making some concrete changes to their body. But I think that it's important for people to understand the reason why so many individuals are pushed into transition is because of a very common misconception that is used all the time in the affirmative model of care. And that justification is, if you don't intervene soon, the person will be at risk of killing themselves. Now, there's been study after study that debunks this claim. It's not accurate. And telling individuals that they might kill themselves is a very unhealthy way of supporting people who are in distress. So when parents, for example, have a child who's struggling on gender issues and they take them to a gender clinic, they are told that they have to affirm the child's new identity, even when a parent is really concerned. Let's say their child is on the autism spectrum, or their child is struggling with severe depression before they started to question their gender. And many parents have told me they've been asked, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? So this is unfortunately a really big justification that is used for childhood interventions, which creates sterility in children. They will grow up to have, underdeveloped genitals. They may struggle to even have sexually functioning body parts. And it's based on the idea that the child will kill themselves. I've been thinking about the CDC reporting on suicide. And the CDC has very strict guidelines on how we're allowed to report about suicide, because we know if we glamorize it too much, if we simplify the reasons for suicide, it can end up creating more instances of suicide. So from a big picture perspective, the fact that affirmative clinicians and activists use this suicide narrative to push parents feels incredibly irresponsible, and it feels very dangerous for the kids themselves, who should be encouraged to be capable and strong and don't worry, you can get through this, rather than telling a child, if we don't do this for you, you're likely to kill yourself. I mean, that feels so unethical to me. It gets dark so fast. I mean, it's so hard to keep it light.
Oh, Sasha, please, this is not Sesame Street. Do I look like Big Bird? No, I am Little Fish. I'm getting this sense. Is it tricky to discuss this topic?
It's hard to talk about these subjects for several reasons. I think one big thing is that everybody feels a lot of pressure to do the right thing. We're supposed to just listen to others' experiences without having our own thoughts about it. And so people feel a lot of pressure to just be quiet. And one of the problems I think that happens when we do that to one another is that it disconnects us from our instincts. So, if you are a parent or even a sibling of somebody who's struggling with gender, your instinct might tell you, I know that my brother, for example, has been really depressed for a long time. And I know that, one of his close friends is questioning their gender. And I suspect that maybe that's part of it. And if you try to voice that opinion to somebody you might get a lot of reactions saying, that's transphobic, that's bigotry, that's hateful. When we use terms like that shut down our ability to think for ourselves or to say what we feel is true, it can be a really powerful force of social control that really divorces us from what our gut is telling us to be true. And I think that's a big problem. Now, I understand that we need to, check our biases. So if you notice that you have a bias, for example, you be aware of it, you be able to acknowledge it, but then you still have to be able to think clearly and say, well, in this case, actually, my bias is not impacting me because so and so factors make me really convinced that this is what might be going on. And I think we forget to do that. And we jump to the other side, that we should be, willing to dismiss everything we first considered or thought was true.
Oh, you reminded me of something, Sasha. Sorry, I could talk with my audience again. So from what I am now remembering, Sasha's perspective is not popular with some people. It's a tricky side of the topic to explore, and that is partly why I was interested in it. If a fish cannot swim through these rough waters, then who can? But also, she does get called those names she mentioned. Now, is she right? I don't know. These are complicated human matters, and I am a fish. But is she something phobic, hateful? My sense is that she cares about these people and wants to help. Or maybe I just don't want to insult her. She is 10 feet tall. She could squish me like a squishy fishy. Okay, Sasha. Oh, you're laughing at me. It's okay. I have one more question. So, Sasha, if we still don't know too much about the causes of gender dysphoria, perhaps it is hard to give specific advice, but maybe you can give general advice for anyone, adults, children, mermaids even, who feel a certain discomfort in their own bodies.
Well, it's important to know that we all feel kind of distressed by our bodies right now. We can feel disconnected from them. I think it's a challenge when we spend so much time on screens and looking at 2D images. And I think a great antidote to that is actually feeling things and experiencing things with our bodies. So maybe you get out there and develop a new hobby or a new skill, even if you're feeling self-conscious about your body. Maybe you pick up skateboarding or dancing or swimming.
Oh, I do lots of swimming. I kind of have to, though. Gets a little bit boring. Do you do any of these exercises, Sasha?
Oh, I do. I lift weights, I go running, and I also dance.
Oh, dancing, you say? Can you teach me something?
Like right now?
Yeah, why not? I mean, swimming all day long. Mix it up a little.
Okay, well, let me put you over there.
Okay, going over there. I warn you, Sasha, my footwork will be a little limited.
It's okay, Phil. I think you're really going to like this. So this style of dance is called Saidi.
Saidi?
It's from Upper Egypt. And originally, this is a style of dance that was performed by men. But in the Oriental dance world, we've adapted this so that women can do it too, and I suppose fish can as well.
Okay.
So we do this dance with an asaya, which is Arabic for stick.
So where do we put the stick?
Well, you hold it.
All right.
Now, this is a dance that has really strong rhythms and powerful sounds, so we need to be confident and tall. So start with your shoulders back and head up.
Uh-huh, okay.
We're holding the stick upright, and we're just going to start doing a side step, just to get your body used to the rhythm.
Okay, maybe something like this?
Great job, Phil.
Oh, thank you very much, Sasha.
So now we're going to start raising our knee and pointing the toes.
Okay, how are my fins looking?
I think your fins look great. Now, we have to start working on the stick. So let's stand still and bring the stick forward, rolling it along your hand, back up. Don't hit Cassandra.
Really? Hit Cassandra? Okay, just lightly. Oh, that was too hard. I'm so sorry. Oh, Sasha, did you say not to hit Cassandra?
No.
You know, the stick was causing me problems physically and interpersonally, so I think I will just dance how I feel the music, okay?
Feeling the music is actually a really important part of this.
Okay, then I will just let it all hang out.